So I made a clarified syrup last time, and now it's time to make some Peking-style Clarified Syrup mooncakes. It's an improved version that boasts flavors rose, orange, and nuttiness, a result of rigorous testing over 9 batches. For this mooncake, you must first make the filling, but don't let the ingredients overwhelm you. The concept is straightforward, comprising the dry, the wet, nuts and seeds, and flavorings. Let me break down for you. The dry includes steamed flour and soft sugar. I use this brand from Beijing. The wet consists of raw peanut oil, corn syrup, and osmanthus syrup. This is what the syrup looks like. Don't use a dry flour as it'll be bland. The walnuts, peanuts, pumpkin seeds, and black sesame seeds, all of them are toasted. Then raisins. I used 3 colors not to just add color, but the dark one doesn't taste too sweet, which is a good thing in a mooncake filling. They'll be soaked with rose-flavored sorghum alcohol, and this is what a bottle looks like. Besides that, some mint and rose jam. I recommend this brand not only for this quality, but also because it's a dry jam, not syrupy, making it perfect for this filling. Finally, some candied orange peels. I'm not a fan of the traditional green and red mandarin peels, so I opt for homemade orange peels, which truly makes a difference. Alongside the pumpkin seeds, the two contribute to the filling's colors. Skip the peels if you don't have them. Now there is some preparation to do. First and foremost, add rose-flavored sorghum alcohol to raisins to soak them overnight, or at least for 2 hours. Next, you'll need to steam the flour, and I'll demonstrate how in my next video. In general, you can prepare flour a day or even a few days in advance. After baking the walnuts, get rid of the skin by rubbing your thumbs against them. It'll come off easily. Then cut the walnuts in half, turn 90 degrees, and cut in another half, leaving the nuts in relatively larger chunks for the mooncakes. Split the peanuts in half by crushing them with your hands. Then roughly run the knife through to cut them into relatively big pieces. Lastly, cut orange peels into 0.5 centimeters length. And the preparation is done. Now let's make the filling, and the process is simple. In a bowl, combine the wet ingredients, which is oil, corn syrup, and osmanthus syrup. Use a whisk to thoroughly emulsify them, which should take about 20 seconds. Then add the dry ingredients together, which is soft sugar and steamed flour, using a spoon to mix them thoroughly. Afterward, add the dry into the wet. Use a spoon to mix a little till it reaches a kind of wet sandy texture. Then add the nuts and seeds and all the flavoring ingredients. Continue mixing with a spoon till they're evenly distributed, and then switch to using your hands. Here, patience is key. Initially, the mixture may seem a bit dry and you might be tempted to add some water, but resist that urge. Determine the consistency after 2 minutes. If it can come together as a ball and when pressed it doesn't fall apart, looks smooth with slight cracks on the brim, it's good to go. But if not, you'll need to decide whether to add some water or flour. Evenly divide them into 8 portions, cover with a plastic wrap, and set it aside. Now let's talk about dough, and here's a foundation. Flour, leavening agent, fat, egg, and sweetener. Flour-wise, I used 3 varieties, and they're all-purpose and cake flour, both raw, and steamed flour. Then smelly powder or ammonium bicarbonate, or tofu in Chinese, with some water to dissolve it. Smelly powder is classic in traditional Chinese pastries, so don't skip it. But if you have to, replace it with a blend of 2 parts baking powder plus 1 part baking soda. I use this brand, which is a combination of mostly ammonium bicarbonate and sodium bicarbonate to make it easier to keep at home, I assume. Then soy oil, weigh out from 1 whole egg and save the rest as egg wash, soft sugar, and clarified syrup. First off, heat the oil to around 180 degrees, set it aside, and let it cool to room temperature. Now combine all-purpose cake flour and steamed flour and mix well. If you're in a hurry and doesn't have varieties at hand, you may just use cake flour instead. However, keep in mind that the result will be different. Next, add water to the smelly powder mix. Don't worry if the powder doesn't dissolve. Now in a big bowl, add oil, clarified syrup, egg, and soft sugar. Use a whisk to vigorously mix for about 2 minutes or till the mixture turns pale in color. Then let it smell the powder solution, and you'll see formation bubbles at this stage. Keep whisking, and the color will quickly become even paler. Now it's time to add a flour mixture, but add it in 3 portions. After each portion, use a rubber spatula to scoop and mix, as demonstrated in the video. Do not whisk. Once the majority of white flour bits are gone, add a second portion and repeat. The dough has thickened considerably. When it's time for the final portion, don't add it all, but leave about 2 tablespoons in the bowl. Flours have different water absorption rates, so adjust at the end. If the dough becomes too difficult to handle with a spatula, switch to the bench scraper and transfer the dough to the countertop. This dough is akin to cookie or short crust dough, so it requires a folding technique. Begin by folding in the corner one by one, like folding a parcel. Do not knead it to avoid gluten forming. If you feel the dough needs the remaining flour, go ahead and add it all. Then repeat the folding process till no visible white bits are left. You can also fold it a third way in and another third way in on top. Once it feels smooth, stop folding. Roll it into log and evenly divide it into 8 portions. Roughly roll them into balls and cover them with a plastic wrap. Here's a tip. Ensure that the firmness of dough matches that of filling, otherwise it may crack during baking. Gently press the dough in your palms while turning it until it reaches diameter about 9 centimeters. Center the filling on it, flip it over, and gently press the air out of the dough from the top downward. Then flip it again. Place your left thumb on top of the filling and use your right hand to push the dough up slowly and carefully to the very top. Eventually, close the tip and gently press and smooth it. Flip it once more and roll it in your hands to form a ball, then place it onto a baking sheet. I prefer to wrap all the fillings at once and then press and mold them. Here's an example of why the filling shouldn't be softer than the dough. It becomes challenging to press out the air and even more difficult to push the dough up. In the end, it results in a disaster and the dough becomes unusable. In terms of mold, I don't have this Peking-style reverse pressure mold, so I proceed with the standard 100 grams Cantonese-style mold, which I believe will work well for a 90 grams dough, mimicking the height that a Peking-style is known for. Add some all-purpose flour into the mold, roll it around to cover all inner side. Then push it against the counter to get rid of the excess flour and place it on top of the dough. Gently press it down till you feel the resistance. Then swirl the mold 3 times, release, and then press it down again while lifting it up. And voila, the dough now has a pattern. Repeat with the remaining dough. Soak a pastry brush in whole egg wash and get rid of as much excess as possible. Then brush the cakes 3 times, each time turn your baking sheet 180 degrees around. You only need to lightly brush the protruding lines on the top, no need to brush the sides. Then put it into the preheated oven set to 230 degrees for the top heat and 200 degrees for the bottom heat. Start by baking for 5 minutes, then lower the top to 190 and the bottom to 160 and continue baking for 15 to 18 minutes. Unlike the Cantonese mooncakes, Peking-style mooncakes don't feature a lot of brown color, and unlike the Cantonese style, it can be enjoyed right after cooling. This dough is intended to be crumbly without being excessively crispy or hard. I wouldn't describe its texture as sandy since it remains firm straight out of the oven. The filling boasts a delightful fragrance with a prominent rose aroma, followed by the notes of orange and nuts. On day 2, the dough has retained its firmness and hasn't become soggy to the touch, but its sweetness is mellowed, creating a more balanced flavor profile. After 48 hours, the dough has softened, but it still retains its crumbly texture. If I compare it to the dough made solely with cake flour from 24 hours ago, I'd say the 2 doughs taste quite similar. However, I sense that the cake flour dough feels slightly soggier, while the mixed flour dough remains a touch crumblier. So I believe adding steamed flour does make a difference. Comment below if you're interested to know how steamed flour affects the dough. I'll be sure to include it in my next video. That's it for today. Happy Chinese Moon Festival!